Welcome to Avira Digital's podcast series, which focuses on redefining the medical and evidence management, digitization, and AI. Today we have Dr. Toyin, who has over 20 years of experience as a board certified infection disease physician, clinical researcher. She's been medical director, educator, and advocate. She's also a professor of medicine and have published over 60 articles and over 85 abstracts in the area of HIV, aging, hepatitis C, health disparities. Very exciting. So Toyin is currently working with Gilead Sciences as an executive director of HIV medical affairs. Having said that, let's hear more from Toyin. Toyin, over to you.
Wow, thank you so much, Angie, for having me over and for that very generous welcome and introduction. Like you said, my name is Toyin Nwafor, and I am an infectious disease physician and an executive director in medical affairs. And again, just to start off, disclaimer that my views are mine only and don't necessarily represent the views of my employer. But I'm really excited to be here because I've been in the field for a couple of decades now around HIV, and in my clinical work and all that I've done both in the inpatient and outpatient setting was around contributing my part to ending the epidemic, providing care for people living with HIV, vulnerable to HIV, and doing my part clinically and as a researcher to help end the HIV epidemic. And then more recently, in the last 5 years, transitioned to pharma and in medical affairs to continue that work. So thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you. And over the decade, you worked in the clinical care, public health, and now you're transitioning to medical affairs. So, how is that journey shaped the way you think the role of medical affairs as an overall, especially in the HIV area?
Absolutely. So if you think about what we do in the clinic and as a clinician or researcher, we're educating not just our trainees, medical students, residents, fellows, healthcare teams. We're leading teams. We're educating our patients, right, on their disease state, their conditions, their medications. We're educating our cross-functional partners. We're sharing scientific information, right, with our patients, with our trainees. We're generating evidence, right, in the clinics to say, what are the unmet needs? Is this data available? Do we need to generate data? And we're looking at ways to inform and advise others in our ecosystem. So that's what you do as a clinician, as a researcher. And I ended up in a county health system, so public health system with a lot of underserved or uninsured public insured patients. I also worked at the VA hospital. I worked at an academic program. I trained at a university program. So you see a diversity of patients. You see a diversity of payer coverage. You see a diversity of where people are in their illness journey and also in terms of trainees. And as a clinician, that's what you're doing. I think that really shapes how clinicians transition into medical affairs. Because if you think about what we do in medical affairs, we're educating. That's a big thing. Stakeholders, educating our HCPs on how to put new treatments and new options and embed that into their clinical practice, right? Understanding the efficacy, safety, patient selection, how to have those joint decision making with their patients. So we're doing a lot of education, right, of HCPs, of HCP type organizations. We're having scientific exchange. So we're out there really in medical affairs, talking about new data, exchanging information with our healthcare providers, making sure we're understanding what their unmet needs are their data gaps. We're generating evidence, right? That's something medical affairs does. By those conversations, we're generating evidence, we're bringing insights back in to fill data gaps, to inform strategy, to inform pipeline development. And we're really strong cross-functional partners in the ecosystem of wherever we are in pharma. So I think being a clinician who worked inpatient, outpatient, who had cross-functional partners in the hospital, who had to exchange information and get data, really prepares us for medical affairs. And so it's that same thing, but being able to contribute to ending the HIV epidemic on a larger scale outside of your own clinical practice or your sphere of influence. So we are in a space where we're able to have conversations and education at scale. We're able to impact geographies outside of our own local environment. So I think for many of us in clinical practice, the transition to medical affairs and continue to do what we love, educate, engage with HCPs, disseminate information, bring insights in, generate evidence, be part of evidence generation, and it's all the stuff we do. So I think it's phenomenal.
And especially, when you're looking at this from the medical affairs lenses, you are dealing with so many different healthcare stakeholders across the board, educating, making sure that the patients who are in need, you're giving the appropriate treatments options. Obviously, you're helping your own company, Pharma, where you worked with. So there's a lot of times of medical affairs teams we have seen spend a lot of time on planning and ensuring the medical grant, the investigational researches are happening. They're all in compliant processes and a lot of other things. In last 10 plus years, we have seen a very significant medical affairs change and they're becoming more strategic partner to the pharma. And I wanted to really see your point of view. How do you see medical affairs evolve? Being a, I would say, support function in the past to more proactive and strategic role in shaping the healthcare outcomes now.
Absolutely. And I've only been in pharma 5 years, and I've watched quite a few of your guests, and some people have been in medical affairs 10, 15, 20 years. I've been
Thank you.
5 years, and even in the last 5 years, I have seen and heard and the intentionality that people are putting into really highlighting and amplifying the role that medical affairs plays in pharma. Like you said, not as a support partner, not as a nice to have, not as a would be great, as a strategic partner, as co-leaders, as thought leaders, and really strategic partners across not just leading the medical function, but with their cross-functional partners and at all parts of the company, right? From pipeline to future to strategy and really playing that active role. And I think a couple of things that have led to that is just looking at how things are going and the fact that medical affairs has the unique opportunity to be that right there with the HCPs, right? So they're getting insights directly from HCPs. They're having clinical conversations. They have, we know on average, a lot more time that HCPs spend with their medical scientists as they would with a commercial colleague. So you're able to deep dive into what's actually the issues are. As medications become a bit sometimes more complex or the nuances of what you need to know become more important, the ability to discuss safety and efficacy and differentiation and patient-centered and informed decision making are things that medical is well positioned to do, but also the ability to be able to understand the disease landscape, right? That helps inform strategy. The ability to help partner with your cross-functional commercial colleagues about what's important, regulatory. So I think as medical really looks at their role as strategic partners across the ecosystem with their commercial, regulatory, in research affairs, public affairs, government affairs, it becomes very important how important medical affairs is. And to be those trusted and respected partners with their HCPs. And as more and more organizations put the North Star of the
Right.
patient centricity, that becomes really important. And medical affairs can show up in all of those spaces, bringing in the patient voice into our medical narratives and making sure that we're aware of all of those other things that impact, right? The drug development is important, but understanding the context of where that drug will
Absolutely.
land, where sometimes 2 to 3 to 5 years ahead, what else is in that landscape to help inform the company. So I have seen medical affairs playing a more proactive role and continuing to in all of those aspects of policy and developing the narrative and the messaging. And then more important and most importantly, those leveraging those real world evidence and insights and really being very thoughtful partners in translating insights into action and strategy. Medical affairs is very well positioned to do that.
And absolutely. So, what we have seen, right, over the years, and especially in the recent past with the explosion of data and increased richness of information in medical affairs these days across the industry, okay? Currently, medical affairs activities are planned and managed the way we have seen it, more static and decentralized documents, PowerPoint, Excels, those kind of delivery mechanisms. So we are living a time of data overload, right? But not necessarily the insights from all those data. Right? So how medical affairs, and particularly in your area of HIV, how it translate that into real world data, into action that genuinely address the healthcare equities?
That's a really great question. And you talk about, right? So when you ask and you receive, you got to know what the next step is. We talk about an infectious disease person. We always talked about when we're doing your TB testing or HIV testing, have a plan, right? So when you do something, you test, you have a plan, right? We know with HIV, when you test, you have a plan for people who test negative, you have people who test positive, you know what to do. And it's important to know as we start to look at different ways of getting insights, like you mentioned, what are we doing with those insights and how do we translate insights to action? So, a couple of things, just from my observations and learnings, is first of all, we have to upskill teams. And that's something that happens to upskill the people who are bringing insights in. What is a good insight, right? What is that process? How to tell stories in a way that how you're actively listening. So, people upskilling is really important in terms of the quality of the
Mhm.
insights that we bring in. And there are going to be insights that come in from non other channels where they're just coming in through social listening and a whole variety of ways, right?
Absolutely.
Those are unfiltered, unedited, but in the ones where we actually have a part to play in terms of documenting insights, upskilling our teams to understand why insights are important, right? They're not just checklists, they inform strategy and feeding back to them action items that happen from insights. It's always helpful to see the loop that the stuff they're collecting, someone's listening, they're collating it, and it's doing something. So, really being able to upskill people about insights to action, really looking at stakeholder engagement. So, as we're developing our insights, to really look at with HCPs and community orgs, like what are the insights and things that are relevant and accountable, right? What are things that would be important for us to actually act on based on where it's coming from? The other thing is, I think that one of the things we can do with that is also look at how we're analyzing the data. Sometimes things are really they're rich, the analytics may be taking a little longer. So we have to also be able to rapidly analyze, and that's where AI and some of the tools that we have that can help streamline some of those, right? Obviously, you need the human and all that in there, but there are ways that we can help instead of feeding back insights in actionable ways and in a rapid fashion we're getting insights from ad boards, from MSLs on the field, from social listening, from congresses, there's so many ways, but how do we synthesize that around themes
Absolutely.
and get that done? And then the other part is when we get these insights, some will inform strategy, but also how we communicating our findings back to the relevant stakeholders. Because when people feel like insights are leading to action and actionable items, you are more likely to be able to get more insights that change the paradigm and move things along through all of those media and really having community as part of your listening and community as part of your action items. Because I think there are things that having community in terms of content and context really helps in that process. So there's a lot of data, but we need to be able to understand where the data are coming from, the insights, figure out how to use work streams to simplify the analysis, and then have very concrete things that we do with that information, because that's how you change paradigms. That's how you address evidence gaps. And that's how you actually make a meaningful difference in closing gaps in HIV outcomes.
Absolutely. So since you brought it up, a lot of AI and the information, the data sitting across the different platforms, and how do you create the entire integrated evidence planning, the platform, the dissemination of the information, creating the impact measurements of those information and feedback loop. The world has certainly changed since 2023 with Gen AI is really transforming the traditional activities. So, with the rapid advancement of AI, the platform, the real world evidences, what future capabilities do you believe medical affairs must build to stay relevant and lead the conversation in the therapeutic area like HIV or any other therapeutic area? I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, sure. It's good. I'll start off with that. It's moving in the right direction, right? Because now we have more tools in our disposal. But again, we know that tools are only as great as how they're deployed. And one of the things that we have to be very conscious of, people in HIV, are that as we continue to innovate, right, with our portfolios, that our ongoing innovation do not worsen existing health disparities, because there are health disparities in HIV and a lot of other therapeutic
Mhm.
areas, both in terms of HIV treatment, HIV prevention, and where we are with ending the epidemic. So as we innovate with our portfolio and our medicines and stuff in pharma, we have to be intentional about making sure that innovation does not worsen existing disparities. So what are some of the things that medical affairs will have to do to keep up with all the stuff that's going on? I think if we think about it, is obviously the portfolio, the innovation is great, and making sure that we're able to adequately and succinctly communicate the importance of innovation, really being able to tie the unmet needs in our therapeutic areas to why there needs to be a rich pipeline and why R&D is important and all of those things. So that's the innovation part. But I think we need to think about our processes, the P, and our people, right? So in terms of what needs to happen to keep medical, our processes, we have to figure out how we can streamline our processes. We want to stay obviously compliant and make sure everything's legal and compliant, but we need to figure out how we streamline processes so that where we can compliantly integrate AI to help. There are a couple of things that could be somewhat automated, helping with analyzing insights, sometimes creating agendas for things. And people have very different ways where we can streamline our processes, make them more efficient, look at that. And then how do we incorporate technology, looking at test cases, use cases. Sometimes it's test and learn. Are we going to deploy this? Do we start off with one therapeutic area? So that's ability to do that. And then the other part is the people in medical affairs, right? So how do we train people about how to incorporate AI into their work streams? How do we upskill people in other aspects that they may not be necessarily attuned with as medical affairs, as clinicians, right? So things around storytelling and active listening,
Absolutely.
how to speak persuasively, how to influence people, because the influence is not just external and working with your external partners, but internally with our cross-functional partners, right? How do you network effectively? How do you focus and prioritize? Because, like you said, data is coming from different places. We're trying to be in different omni channels. Focus and prioritization is going to be very important for medical affairs, just like in any other aspect of the
Absolutely.
company. How do you upskill on business acumen? The more medical affairs understands about strategy and the larger business case while we're in medical, it helps for us to understand where our deliverables are and how we can be partners to support the commercial compliantly with the appropriate firewalls. So I think, but also for people who come from a clinical background, it's a great opportunity to learn different skills. Some of them you had in clinical practice, because in clinical practice, you had to you have to be able to network and get your radiologist and your surgeon to do something for your patient. You have to be able to advocate for your patients. You have to be able to speak to your administration if you needed to have a new diagnostic test covered for your patients. So all of those things are things you did in practice, but being able to understand that in pharma as a medical affairs representative, I think is important. So upskilling people about the business of healthcare, about how to tell stories with the data, active listening, prioritization, having to have an enterprise mindset. So you see where your role sits in the larger org and how important it is. So those are all things that are going to make us continue to be in that, like you said, not just nice to haves, but strong strategic partners in pharma.
Thank you so much. One of the last point which you mentioned about the importance of the different data sources, but also it is complementing or layering with the social media platforms. With X hosting the huge number of active healthcare professionals who are providing their views on a medical event. HCPs are visiting various major conferences, congresses across the different therapeutic areas, whether it's ASCO, ESMO, DIA, in a number of areas. So social media layering is becoming very important. I would say enhancing the traditional insight methods, right? So it is becoming very important, and especially with AI playing a role on the social media, getting information from the social media, providing that on your fingertips, as you say, unfiltered information, but someone like you needs to filter that, see what's relevant, and then disseminate that information to the right patient who's in need. So just wanted to hear about your AI role in the social media. Do you see that as a area of a growth for medical affairs in the future? And
Answering your question, which was the last part, the answer is yes. And I think for many of us, I think when the advent of a lot of medical information coming outside of the traditional way, like we have a conference, you just get on this the podium and you deliver it simply, oh, okay. But we have to get with the times. One, there are digital opinion leaders, right? DOLs. We've always heard about our KOLs, but the DOLs are people who have that strong social media presence and are able to break down complex medical information in a way that people relate to. Some of them are putting their, I've seen, if you look, you've seen now with LinkedIn and all that, where people are putting their open access journals and doing like bullet point summaries of this just got published and this is that, and then they actually generate a conversation on there. The other thing is that we have, just as if clinicians and medical affairs and pharma don't think about really getting to that space, there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of other people who are social media influencers who people listen to. So it's equally important to have key and trusted HCPs and opinion leaders be on there. And many are getting on there and they're sharing their opinion, they're sharing their articles, they're sharing their thoughts on things. There are insights that can be garnered, right, from pharma and medical affairs through AI and simple tools, but then there need to be people who then, like you said, synthesize that, filter that, look at to see, are there things that are coming in that are regional, right? Are there regional things? Do we have answers to that? Are there partnerships with community organizations to get a better understanding? There might be things that come up triggered through social media listening that makes you say, wow, this is some unmet need that there needs to be data generation on, or there's misinformation that needs to be countered really well, or there's shared decision tools that need to be developed so that HCPs have the ability to answer that. And you may not get that if you're not really socially listening actively. Absolutely. I agree with you that yes, that is a source of information that would be unwise to not harness. And how we do that and what we do with that information will then be the ability to synthesize that and see what's going on, because more and more information is happening in that ecosystem.
Dr. Toyin, thank you so much for participating and giving your perspective on how companies are redefining their digital strategies, Gen AI strategies, and how the medical affairs, as a profession can impact the healthcare ecosystem. So thank you so much. Really appreciate.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed our conversation.